November 15th, 2023. Marcus Rodriguez hadn't thrown a real punch in anger for 15 years. The heavyweight who once knocked out opponents in Madison Square Garden now spent his days training kids in a crumbling East LA gym. That's why nobody expected what happened when Jackie Chan walked through his doors. The cameras were rolling, ESPN, TMZ, social media live streams. The gym erupted in chaos. Phones crashed to the floor as reporters scrambled backward. Someone screamed. The ESPN cameraman kept rolling, his lens trained on Marcus Rodriguez as he stood over Jackie Chan's motionless body, his right fist still clenched, knuckles already swelling. Blood pooled beneath Chan's head where it had struck the concrete floor. "Jesus Christ, Marcus!" His trainer, Eddie Vasquez, vaulted over the ropes. "What the hell did you do?" Marcus couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The words echoed in his skull. "I remember Macau, my friend. 25 years. 25 years he'd convinced himself that night in 1998 was buried, that Tommy Lou's death was ancient history, that nobody else knew what really happened in that rigged fight outside the Golden Dragon Casino. He was wrong. "Call 911, a reporter was shouting into his phone. "Jackie Chan is down. The boxer knocked him unconscious." The sirens were already wailing in the distance. Marcus stared at Chan's face, searching for signs of life. The martial arts legend's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but his eyes remained closed. A thin line of blood trickled from his mouth. "Not move," Marcus told himself. "Do something." But his feet stayed planted. His mind reeled backward to that humid night in Macau, to Tommy Lou collapsing in the ring after what should have been a pulled punch, to the Triad boss who'd paid Marcus $2 million to throw the fight, then doubled it when Tommy died, to the silence that followed, broken only by the sound of his best friend choking on his own blood. "Marcus!" Eddie grabbed his shoulders. "Talk to me, hermano. What happened?" The question snapped him back to the present. What happened? A publicity stunt had turned into a nightmare. A friendly exhibition between legends had become attempted murder on live television. The carefully constructed life he'd built in East LA, the gym, the kids he trained, the reputation he'd rebuilt brick by brick, was crashing down around him. He knew, Marcus whispered. His voice cracked like old leather. He knew about Tommy. Eddie's face went pale. They'd known each other for 30 years. Eddie was the only person Marcus had ever told about Macau, about the blood money that bought this gym, about the nightmares that still woke him up screaming Tommy's name. The paramedics burst through the gym doors, equipment clanging. They dropped to their knees beside Chan, checking vitals, shouting medical jargon Marcus didn't understand. One of them, a young Latina woman with steady hands, looked up at Marcus with disgust. "What did you hit him with? A tire iron?" "My fist," Marcus said. She stared at him like he was insane. "Your fist did this?" Marcus held up his right hand. The knuckles were split and bleeding, but the real damage wasn't visible. The real damage was in the muscle memory of a punch thrown with 25 years of guilt behind it. A punch meant to silence the one person who could destroy him. The gym filled with police officers. Detective Sarah Chen flashed her badge and immediately took control of the scene. She was small, Asian maybe 40, with eyes that missed nothing. She looked from Chan to Marcus and back again. "Mr. Rodriguez, I need you to step away from the victim." Victim. The word hit him like a body blow. Chan wasn't supposed to be a victim. This was supposed to be theater, entertainment, two old warriors dancing for the cameras. Instead, it had become a repeat of the worst night of Marcus's life. "Is he going to make it?" Marcus asked. Detective Chen studied him carefully. "That depends on how hard you hit him and why. This was supposed to be an exhibition match, correct? Choreographed? Safe?" Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. "Then explain to me why Jackie Chan is unconscious with what appears to be a fractured skull." The paramedics were lifting Chan onto a stretcher now. As they moved him, his eyes fluttered open for just a moment. Despite the blood, despite the obvious pain, he looked directly at Marcus and smiled. It was the same smile he'd worn when he walked into the gym an hour ago. The smile that said he knew exactly what he was doing. Then his eyes closed again, and they wheeled him toward the ambulance. Detective Chen was still waiting for an answer. The reporters were still recording. Eddie was still staring at Marcus like he'd never seen him before. and somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed like ghosts from Macau. Marcus Rodriguez had spent 25 years running from the truth, but the truth had finally caught up with him, wearing Jackie Chan's face and speaking 5 words that destroyed everything. I remember Macau, my friend. The question now wasn't whether his secret would come out. The question was whether Jackie Chan would live long enough to tell it. Marcus sat alone in his office above the gym, watching the last police cruiser pull away from the curb. The streetlights cast long shadows through his blinds, painting prison bars across the walls. His right hand throbbed where the paramedic had bandaged his split knuckles, but the pain felt distant, almost borrowed from someone else's body. The silence was crushing. For 20 years, this building had been his sanctuary. Rodriguez Boxing Academy, the faded gold letters still visible on the window downstairs, had been his redemption project. Every heavy bag he'd hung, every trophy the kids had won, every success story that walked out these doors had been another layer of paint over the rust of Macau. But now the quiet felt different, contaminated. Marcus pulled open his desk drawer and stared at the photograph hidden beneath a stack of invoices. Tommy Liu, age 23, grinning in his Everlast trunks after winning the Pacific Rim Lightweight Championship. His best friend, his sparring partner since they were teenagers in Boyle Heights, the man he'd killed for $2 million in blood money. You should eat something. Eddie's voice made him jump. His trainer stood in the doorway holding 2 paper bags from Lupita's Tacos down the street. Eddie Vasquez had been Marcus's corner man for 3 decades, through the championship years, through the fall, through the long climb back to respectability. At 65, he moved like his knees hurt, but his eyes were still sharp enough to spot a telegraph from across the ring. "Not hungry," Marcus said, sliding the drawer shut. Eddie limped over and set the food on the desk anyway. The smell of carnitas and fresh tortillas filled the small office. "When's the last time you ate? Before Chan showed up?" Marcus couldn't remember. The day felt like it had lasted years. "How bad is it downstairs?" "Bad." Eddie eased into the chair across from him, wincing as his knees bent. "ESPN's been running the footage every 10 minutes. TMZ's got a van parked outside. Some blogger's already calling you the East LA executioner." The nickname hit like ice water. 25 years ago, the Hong Kong press had called Tommy's death an accident, a tragedy born from 2 hungry fighters who didn't know when to quit. But this was being painted as something darker. "What are they saying about Chan?" "Serious, but stable. Fractured skull, concussion, some bleeding on the brain. They got him into surgery at Cedars." Eddie unwrapped a taco and pushed it toward Marcus. "The doctors say he'll live, but brain injuries are tricky. Could be weeks before they know if there's permanent damage." Marcus stared at the food without seeing it. Through the floor, he could hear the gym's familiar sounds, the rhythmic thump of heavy bags, the squeak of speed bag chains, the shuffle of feet on canvas even at 8 p.m. kids were down there training. Miguel Santos, 16, who might make varsity boxing if he kept his grades up. Carla Mendez, 15, whose jab was already college scholarship material. Danny Rodriguez, no relation despite the name, who'd been coming here since he was 12 to escape his father's drinking. These kids were his real legacy, clean victories earned through honest sweat. But now their gym was a crime scene, their coach a viral video villain. "You gonna tell me what really happened down there?" Eddie's voice was careful, like he was approaching a wounded animal. "Because what I saw, that wasn't you, Marcus. I've seen you spar thousands of rounds. You don't throw punches like that in exhibitions. You don't try to take someone's head off for cameras." Marcus looked at his oldest friend. Eddie had been there the night he came back from Macau, broken and rich and terrified. Eddie had helped him buy this building with Tommy's blood money, had never asked questions when Marcus woke up screaming, had watched him build something good from something terrible. "He said something to me, right before I hit him." What kind of something? The 5 words that had shattered his world felt too dangerous to speak aloud. Even here, even with Eddie, the walls felt like they had ears. He knew about Tommy. Eddie's face went gray. He set down his taco and leaned forward. "That's impossible. Nobody knows about Tommy except the people who were there." Marcus finally met his friend's eyes. What if Chan was there that night, in Macau? The possibility hung between them like smoke. Eddie was quiet for a long time, thinking. Outside, a news van's generator hummed. Footsteps echoed on the stairs as the last kids headed home. If that's true, Eddie said finally, then this wasn't random. Chan didn't just walk into your gym for a publicity stunt. No. Marcus touched his bandaged knuckles. He came here to finish something. The office felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Somewhere in a hospital across the city, Jackie Chan lay unconscious, carrying secrets that could destroy everything Marcus had built. And tomorrow, the whole world would be watching to see what happened next. The phone rang at 3:47 a.m. Marcus jerked awake in his office chair, neck stiff from sleeping, hunched over his desk. The fluorescent light above flickered like a dying star. For a moment, he couldn't place the sound. Who still had the landline number? But the shrill ring cut through his confusion like a blade through silk. He stared at the ancient rotary phone on his desk, the same one that had been here when he bought the building. Eddie called it a relic. Marcus kept it because cell phones could be traced, recorded, hacked. Some conversations required older technology. The phone rang again. Marcus's hand hovered over the receiver. At this hour, it could only be bad news. Hospital calling to say Chan had died. Police with an arrest warrant, or worse. He picked up on the fourth ring. Rodriguez. Silence. Then breathing, soft and deliberate. The sound of someone savoring a moment they'd waited decades to experience. Hello, Thunder. The voice hit him like a punch to the solar plexus. Cantonese accented English, smooth as aged whiskey. He hadn't heard it in 25 years, but recognition was instant, visceral. The voice belonged to a ghost. Wei, Marcus whispered. Very good. Your memory serves you well. Wei Xing Lam chuckled, and the sound transported Marcus back to that humid night in Macau, back to the Golden Dragon Casino's private boxing ring, back to handshakes that sealed death warrants. Though I understand you prefer Mr. Wei these days, my business interests have expanded since our last meeting. Marcus's throat went dry. Wei had been mid-level triad then, hungry and ambitious, the kind of man who arranged fixed fights for pocket change. If he was calling now after all these years, it meant he'd climbed much higher in the organization, which made him infinitely more dangerous. What do you want? Still direct. I always appreciated that about you, Thunder. Very American. Wei's voice carried across the miles like smoke. I want to discuss our mutual friend, Mr. Chan. I understand he had an unfortunate accident at your establishment. The words were careful, neutral, but Marcus heard the threat underneath. Wei knew. Of course he knew. He'd probably known the moment Jackie Chan walked into Rodriguez Boxing Academy. Maybe he'd even arranged it. Chan came here for a publicity stunt. Things got out of hand. Yes, I saw the footage. Quite spectacular. Though I must say, your technique has improved since Macau. Tommy Liu went down much harder. Hearing Tommy's name spoken aloud made Marcus's vision blur. His free hand clenched into a fist, splitting the scabs on his knuckles. Blood seeped through the white bandages. That was an accident. Was it? Wei's laughter was soft, intimate, like they were sharing a private joke. $2 million says otherwise. Plus interest, of course. 25 years of compound interest adds up to quite a sum. The office walls seemed to pulse with Marcus's heartbeat. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. Ambulance, police, fire, he couldn't tell. The sound reminded him that the world was still turning, still burning, while his past reached through the phone line to drag him back to hell. I don't owe you anything. Our business was finished in Macau. Our business will be finished when I say it's finished. Wei's voice hardened, showing steel beneath the silk. You took my money. You killed my fighter. You disappeared into your American dream and left me to clean up the mess. Do you know what that cost me? The questions from Beijing? The investigations? Marcus closed his eyes, but Tommy's face was waiting in the darkness. Young, trusting, completely unaware that his best friend had already sold his life for enough money to disappear forever. What happened to Chan today was a message, Wei continued. A reminder that some debts never expire. He was supposed to deliver it gently, with words. But you always were too proud to listen. The truth hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. Chan hadn't come to expose him. He'd come to warn him. Those 5 words, "I remember Macau, my friend," weren't a threat, they were a plea. But Marcus had heard only his own guilt, his own fear, and responded with violence. "You used him," Marcus said. "You put him at risk." "I used a willing messenger. Mr. Chan has his own complications with our organization. He was happy to deliver a warning in exchange for certain considerations." Wei paused, savoring the moment. "But now he's unconscious and my message remains undelivered, so I'm forced to be more direct." The line crackled with static, distance, and 25 years of buried sin. Marcus looked around his office, the boxing trophies, the photos of kids he'd trained, the legitimate life he'd built on Tommy's grave. All of it felt fragile suddenly, like a house of cards in an earthquake. "What do you want?" he asked again. "Justice. Thunder. It's long overdue." The line went dead. Marcus sat in the flickering light, holding a silent phone, knowing his old life was truly over. Wei Xing Lam had found him. The past had returned with compound interest, and the bill was finally due. Marcus set the phone down like it might explode. His hands trembled as he reached for the desk drawer, pulled out a bottle of Jameson he'd been saving for emergencies. This qualified. The whiskey burned his throat but couldn't touch the ice in his chest. He had to think, had to plan. Wei Xing Lam didn't make idle threats, and 25 years in the shadows had clearly made him more dangerous, not less. But what did he want? Money? Marcus had some saved, but nothing close to what Wei might demand with compound interest. Blood? That seemed more likely. The office felt exposed now, like Wei's voice had somehow contaminated it. Marcus pulled the blinds shut and checked the locks twice. Old habits from the months after Tommy died, when every shadow might hide a triad assassin. His cell phone buzzed. A text from Eddie. "Can't sleep." "You okay up there?" Marcus almost typed back no, then stopped. Eddie had a wife, grandkids in Phoenix. Whatever was coming, Marcus wouldn't drag his friend any deeper into it. He deleted the message without responding. But Eddie's concern reminded him he wasn't completely alone. Not yet. He scrolled through his contacts, thumb hovering over Detective Chen's number. She'd left her card before the police cleared out, told him to call if he remembered anything else about the incident. Professional courtesy between former athletes. She'd recognized his name from the old championship fights. What would he tell her? That Jackie Chan had come to his gym carrying a message from a triad boss? That the random exhibition was actually the opening move in a 25-year-old game of chess? That Marcus had killed his best friend for money and was about to pay the price? She'd think he was having a breakdown. Hell, maybe he was. Marcus set the phone aside and tried to focus. Wei wanted justice, but what did that mean? In the triad world, justice was usually swift and public, a warning to others who might think about crossing the organization. But Wei had waited 25 years. That suggested something more elaborate than a simple execution. The whiskey helped him think, loosened the knots of panic in his chest. Wei could have killed him any time in the past quarter century. Could have exposed the fixed fight, destroyed his reputation, sent him to prison. Instead, he'd let Marcus build something. Let him get attached to this place, these kids, this life, so he could take it all away. Marcus walked to the window and peered through the blinds. The TMZ van was still parked across the street, its crew asleep in the front seats. Tomorrow there would be more reporters, more questions, more scrutiny. The spotlight that Wei needed to make his justice public. Footsteps on the stairs made him freeze. Too heavy for Eddie, too confident for random kids. Marcus grabbed a tire iron from behind his desk, old paranoia from the early days when former opponents sometimes came looking for revenge. The steps stopped outside his door. 3 soft knocks. A pause. 2 more knocks. Marcus's blood turned to slush. He knew that pattern. Had heard it 100 times in Macau, outside hotel rooms where money and lives changed hands. It was Wei's signature, his calling card. But Wei was in Hong Kong or Beijing or wherever crime bosses live these days. Unless... Marcus? The voice was young, female, slightly nervous. "It's Officer Martinez. Detective Chen asked me to check on you." He exhaled slowly, set down the tire iron. Paranoia was making him stupid. Wei wouldn't send a cop to his door. Would he? Marcus cracked the door open, keeping the chain engaged. A young Latina officer stood in the hallway, uniform crisp despite the late hour. She looked familiar, maybe one of the cops from earlier. "Everything okay in there?" Neighbor called about noise. "Just dropped something," Marcus said. "Sorry." She nodded but didn't leave. Instead, she glanced around the empty hallway, then leaned closer to the door. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder. "Mr. Wei sends his regards." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He tried to slam the door, but her boot was already in the gap. She smiled, and he saw something in her eyes that didn't belong on a cop's face, something predatory. "He thought you might need some time to consider his offer, but he doesn't want you to feel unprotected." Marcus stepped back, mind racing. How deep did Wei's reach go? How long had this been planned? The officer, if she was really an officer, pushed the door open and stepped inside. Her hand rested casually on her service weapon. "The children downstairs train late," she observed, looking around the office. "Miguel Santos, Carla Mendez, that boy Danny. Mr. Wei knows all their names, their addresses, their school schedules. He wants you to know that your choices affect more than just yourself." The threat was clear. Marcus felt his carefully built world crumbling. Wei hadn't just found him. He'd studied him, mapped his life, identified every pressure point. "What does he want?" Marcus asked. The officer smiled again. "Justice, Mr. Rodriguez. He'll be in touch with the details." She left without another word, her footsteps echoing down the stairs like a countdown timer. Marcus locked the door behind her and slumped against it, finally understanding the scope of his situation. Wei wasn't just coming for him. He was coming for everyone Marcus cared about. The past had teeth, and they were closing fast. Marcus stood frozen against the door for 10 minutes, listening to every sound in the building. The heating system's wheeze, a car alarm 3 blocks away, his own ragged breathing. When silence finally convinced him the officer was truly gone, he stumbled to his desk and grabbed the bottle of Jameson with shaking hands. The whiskey tasted like ashes. Everything tasted like ashes now. Miguel Santos, Carla Mendez, Danny Rodriguez. Wei had spoken their names like he was reading from a shopping list. How long had his people been watching, taking notes, learning schedules, mapping vulnerabilities, building files on children whose only crime was training in the wrong gym? Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to Miguel's contact. The kid's mother worked double shifts at the garment factory, wouldn't be home until midnight. Miguel walked himself to school every morning at 7:15, took the same route through MacArthur Park where anyone could be waiting, where accidents could happen. His thumb hovered over the call button. What would he say? "Don't come to the gym anymore because my past might kill you? Your boxing coach is actually a murderer and now the ghosts want revenge?" The truth would sound like the ravings of a drunk old man, but the lies felt worse. They always had. Marcus set the phone aside and walked to his filing cabinet. Second drawer, behind the insurance papers and equipment receipts, was a manila folder he hadn't opened in 15 years. His hands trembled as he pulled it out, as he spread its contents across his desk, like tarot cards predicting doom. Bank statements from 1998. Deposit slips showing $2 million appearing overnight in an account that technically belonged to his cousin in Riverside, a cousin who died in Desert Storm and whose identity Marcus had quietly maintained for occasions exactly like this. Transfer records showing the money flowing into real estate, investments, eventually the down payment on this building. Blood money, every dollar of it. Tommy Lou's life converted into American currency at the exchange rate of friendship for profit. Marcus stared at a photograph tucked behind the bank records. Tommy at 19, arm around Marcus's shoulders after winning the California Golden Gloves, both of them grinning like they owned the world, like nothing could ever break them apart. Tommy had been the better fighter, faster hands, better footwork, instincts that couldn't be taught. But Marcus had been hungrier, desperate enough to take a meeting in a Chinatown restaurant where Wei Xing Lam explained how desperation could become opportunity. "Your friend Tommy is favored 3-1, Wei had said over dim sum and tea that Marcus couldn't taste. "The odds are unrealistic. Mr. Fong from Macau likes to bet on underdogs. He would be very grateful if the favorite had an off night. $2 million grateful. Enough to disappear, to start over, to escape the poverty that had defined Marcus's life since birth. All he had to do was throw one fight. Hit Tommy a little harder than necessary. Make it look like an accident, which it was supposed to be. Tommy would take a dive, collect his own payoff, and they'd both disappear into new lives. That was the plan. The plan that died when Marcus's uppercut caught Tommy at exactly the wrong angle, when bone met brain in a way that medical science couldn't repair. Marcus's vision blurred as he stared at the photograph. 25 years later, he could still hear the sound Tommy's head had made hitting the canvas. Could still see the confusion in his friend's eyes in those final conscious moments, the way they'd seemed to ask why. His phone rang again, not the landline this time, his cell, displaying a number he didn't recognize. Marcus almost ignored it, then realized Way would have as many phones as he needed, as many officers on payroll, as many ways to reach out and touch someone as money could buy. Rodriguez. Dad? The word hit like a physical slap. Marcus nearly dropped the phone, his mind reeling. The voice was older now, deeper, but unmistakable. He hadn't heard it in 3 years. Carlos? Marcus whispered. Yeah, it's me. His son's voice carried across the miles from Phoenix, where he worked as a paramedic and pretended his father didn't exist. I saw the news. About Jackie Chan, about your gym. Are you okay? The question almost broke him. Carlos had cut contact after learning about the blood money, after Marcus finally confessed where the gym's down payment had really come from. His son had called him a murderer, had said he never wanted to see him again, had changed his last name to his mother's maiden name just to break any connection. Now he was calling. In the middle of the worst night of Marcus's life, his estranged son was checking on him. I'm fine, Marcus lied. How did you? ESPN's been running it every hour. Jesus, Dad, what were you thinking? Chan's in intensive care. They're saying you could face attempted murder charges. Marcus closed his eyes. If only it were that simple. If only his biggest problem was the LAPD. It's complicated, mijo. It always is with you. Carlos's voice hardened. Look, I'm not calling to make peace or anything. But Mom's worried. She thinks you might do something stupid. Like confessing to a 25-year-old murder just to keep Wei Xing Lam from hurting innocent kids. Like trading his freedom for their safety. Like finally accepting responsibility for Tommy's death and everything that came after. Maybe it wasn't stupid at all. Maybe it was long overdue. Carlos, Marcus said carefully, I need you to know something. Whatever happens next, whatever you hear about me, I love you. I've always loved you. And I'm sorry for all of it. Dad? What are you talking about? Dad? But Marcus had already hung up. Some conversations were too dangerous for children, even grown ones. Some sins were too heavy to share. He looked at Tommy's photograph one last time, then slowly began feeding the bank records into his paper shredder. Wei wanted justice, and maybe that was exactly what Marcus deserved, but he'd be damned if he'd make it easy. The war for his soul was just beginning. The phone's dial tone buzzed in Marcus's ear like a flat line. He stared at the device, Carlos's voice still echoing in his head, when a memory surfaced that made his blood freeze. Mom's worried. She thinks you might do something stupid. Marcus set down the phone with deliberate care, his mind racing backward through 25 years of carefully constructed lies. Carmen had left him 6 months after Tommy died. Said she couldn't stand the nightmares, the drinking, the way he'd wake up screaming Tommy's name. She'd taken 3-year-old Carlos and disappeared into a new life while Marcus drowned in guilt and blood money. But what if that wasn't the whole truth? He pulled out his laptop with trembling fingers, typed in a search he should have done decades ago. The screen flickered to life, displaying results that made the room spin around him. Carmen Rodriguez Martinez, Phoenix Emergency Services, employed 1999 present. Married to Detective Robert Martinez, Phoenix PD, 2001. One son, Carlos Martinez, born 1995. Carlos Martinez, not Carlos Rodriguez. Marcus's hands shook as he clicked deeper into the search results. A Phoenix PD charity event from last year, group photo of officers and their families. There was Carmen, older but still beautiful, standing next to a tall man in uniform. And beside them, wearing a paramedic's badge, was Carlos. But it was the man in the background that made Marcus's world collapse. Officer Martinez, the young woman who'd just left his office, who'd delivered Way's threat about knowing the children's names and schedules. The same Martinez who'd claimed to be checking on noise complaints at midnight. The same Martinez who was married to Marcus's ex-wife. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Family reunions can be so complicated, can't they? Marcus stared at the message until his vision blurred. Way hadn't just found him. Way had been watching his family for years, had positioned pieces on the board so carefully that Marcus had never seen the game being played around him. Carmen hadn't left because of the nightmares. She'd left because someone had told her to leave. Someone who needed Marcus isolated, alone, vulnerable. Someone who understood that a man with nothing left to lose was harder to control than a man with everything to protect. The bank records scattered across his desk suddenly looked different. Not evidence of his guilt, but breadcrumbs leading back to a trap 25 years in the making. Marcus grabbed his old address book, flipped to a page he hadn't looked at in decades. Tommy's emergency contacts, scribbled in his friend's careful handwriting. Uncle Wei Xing Lam, Hong Kong. The pages slipped from Marcus's fingers like autumn leaves. Tommy Liu, Wei's nephew. The fighter Marcus had killed wasn't just some random boxer caught in a fixed fight. He was family, blood for blood. That was the triad Wei. Marcus reached for the Jameson with hands that no longer belonged to him. Everything he'd believed about that night in Macau crumbled like a house built on sand. The fixed fight, the easy money, the accident that wasn't supposed to happen, none of it had been real. Wei had wanted Tommy dead from the beginning. Some family dispute, some challenge to power that required permanent resolution. But Wei couldn't kill his own nephew without consequences, without questions from Beijing, without blood feuds that would tear the organization apart. So he'd found a patsy, a desperate American boxer hungry enough to throw a fight, stupid enough to believe he was just taking a dive for easy money. Someone who would hit Tommy Liu hard enough to make it look like an accident, then carry the guilt forever while Wei played the grieving uncle seeking justice. Marcus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. He'd spent 25 years thinking he was a murderer when he'd actually been a murder weapon. Wei's perfectly crafted tool of vengeance, precision forged through years of poverty and desperation. "You arrogant son of a bitch," Marcus whispered to the empty room. His phone rang again. This time, he answered on the first ring. "Feeling nostalgic? Thunder?" Wei's voice carried across the ocean like poison in silk. "I thought you might appreciate learning the full scope of our relationship. Tommy was your nephew. My brother's only son, a promising young man with unfortunate ideas about honor and tradition, ideas that threatened certain business arrangements." Wei's laugh was soft, intimate. "You solved a very delicate family problem for me, though I don't think you ever properly appreciated your role." Marcus closed his eyes, seeing Tommy's face again. Not the confusion and betrayal he'd imagined all these years, but something else, recognition. Tommy had known. In those final moments, he'd understood exactly what was happening and who was really responsible. "He figured it out," Marcus said. "That's why you needed him dead." Intelligence was always Tommy's weakness. He asked too many questions about family business, made too many moral objections. Wei's voice hardened with old grievances. Family is supposed to be loyal, thunder. Blood is supposed to stay silent. The line went quiet except for the sound of two men breathing across an ocean of time and guilt. Finally, Wei spoke again. "Now you understand why this isn't about money. It never was. It's about control," Marcus said, the words tasting like copper in his mouth. "You needed me to believe I was guilty, needed me broken." "Broken men are useful men," Wei confirmed. "They don't ask inconvenient questions. They don't dig into the past. They simply exist, carrying their shame like a cross, grateful for whatever small redemption they're allowed to build." Marcus walked to the window, phone pressed to his ear. The TMZ van was gone now, replaced by a black sedan with tinted windows. How many watchers did Wei have? How many eyes tracking his every move? 25 years, Marcus whispered. "You watched me for 25 years. I invested in you, Thunder, shaped you. Do you think it was coincidence that the building next door went up for sale just when you needed it? That the city approved your gym license so quickly? That certain police investigations into your past never quite found their footing? Way's satisfaction was audible. I gave you purpose. Let you think you were saving these children when really you were just keeping them close. Potential leverage for when I finally needed it. The truth hit like a sledgehammer to the chest. Miguel, Carla, Danny, all the kids he'd trained, all the lives he thought he was improving, they were hostages he'd assembled for his own execution. Way had turned his redemption into a weapon against him. The Chan fight, Marcus said. That was never about publicity. Jackie agreed to help expose a killer. He believes he's pursuing justice for my poor murdered nephew. Way's chuckle was soft, deadly. He has no idea that the man he's hunting has been dead for 25 years, that what remains is just my creation, my creature. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. Not his heart, that had broken years ago. Something deeper, the foundation of every lie he'd told himself about who he'd become. His office door opened. Eddie Ramirez stepped inside, moving with unusual quietness for a man his size. His eyes found Marcus immediately, took in the scattered bank records, the empty whiskey bottle, the phone pressed to his ear. "You okay, boss?" Eddie asked, but his voice carried a strange note. Too careful, too rehearsed. Marcus stared at his old friend, his supposed salvation from the streets, and saw something he'd missed for 15 years. The way Eddie never talked about his past, never mentioned family, old friends, anything before the day he'd shown up looking for work. The way he always seemed to know when Marcus was struggling, always appeared at exactly the right moments. "Eddie," Marcus said slowly, "how long have you been working for him?" Eddie's face didn't change, but his hand moved almost imperceptibly toward the inside of his jacket. "I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus." "Since the beginning," Marcus realized. "Since you walked into this gym 15 years ago, you're his eyes and ears, his insurance policy." "I tried to be a friend," Eddie said quietly. "That wasn't part of the job, but it happened anyway. You're a good man, Marcus. Broken, but good. Good men don't kill their best friends for money." "No," Eddie agreed, "but broken men do what they're told. Usually." The word hung in the air like smoke. Usually. Implying that sometimes broken men remembered how to fight back. Way's voice crackled through the phone, amused. "Having a reunion, are we? Edward has been very helpful over the years, though I suspect his loyalties have become complicated." Marcus looked at Eddie, saw conflict warring in his friend's eyes. Real conflict. Whatever Eddie had started as, he'd become something else over the years. Someone caught between old obligations and new loyalties. "The kids don't know," Eddie said suddenly. "Miguel, Carla, Danny, they're innocent. Whatever happens between you and Way, they don't deserve to pay for it." "Everyone pays." Way's voice cut through the room like a blade. "That's how justice works. Actions have consequences that ripple across generations." Marcus closed his eyes, felt the weight of 25 years pressing down on him. Every choice he'd made, every person he'd let into his life, every moment of happiness or peace, all of it orchestrated by a ghost from Macau who'd turned revenge into an art form. But ghosts made mistakes. They got so focused on the past that they missed what was happening in the present. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at Eddie. Really looked at him. Saw a man torn between duty and conscience. A man who'd spent 15 years watching someone he'd been told was a monster, only to discover a broken human being trying to build something good from the wreckage of his life. Way had made his first miscalculation. He'd sent a killer to watch a killer. But somewhere along the way, both men had learned to care about something beyond their own survival. "Way," Marcus said into the phone, "you made one mistake." "And what's that, Thunder?" Marcus smiled for the first time in hours. "You gave me 15 years to make real friends." The silence stretched taut as a wire between them. Marcus could hear Way's breathing change across the ocean, the first crack in 25 years of perfect control. "Friendship," Way said finally, "is a luxury neither of you can afford." Marcus set the phone on speaker and placed it carefully on his desk. Eddie's hand was still inside his jacket, but his eyes held something that hadn't been there before. Recognition, maybe even hope. "Tell me, Eddie," Marcus said quietly. "What did he promise you? Money? Protection? Or just a purpose for all that anger you carried when you walked through my door?" Eddie's face was stone, but his voice betrayed him. "My daughter." He promised he could find my daughter. The words hit like a physical blow. In 15 years, Eddie had never mentioned a child, never spoken of family beyond vague references to a past he'd rather forget. Elena, Eddie continued, his voice breaking slightly. She was 6 when her mother took her to Mexico, disappeared into the system down there. Way's people, they have connections, resources. He looked at Marcus with eyes full of old pain. He said if I watched you, reported back, he'd bring her home. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Way's perfect web had a flaw he hadn't anticipated. He'd assumed loyalty could be bought with promises, that fear and hope were interchangeable currencies, but he'd forgotten the most dangerous variable in any long con: time. How long since you've heard from her? Marcus asked. 3 years. Eddie's hand slowly withdrew from his jacket. Empty. 3 years of nothing. Just Way telling me to be patient, to wait, to keep watching you like somehow that was going to bring Elena home. Way's laugh crackled through the phone speaker, but it carried less certainty than before. Touching, but irrelevant. You both know too much to simply walk away. Marcus moved to the filing cabinet, pulled out a folder he hadn't touched in a decade. Inside were newspaper clippings from Phoenix, articles he'd collected obsessively during the years after Carmen left, local news stories, sports reports, anything that might give him a glimpse of his son's life. But now he saw them differently, saw the pattern Way had missed in his own arrogance. Detective Martinez, Marcus said, spreading the clippings across his desk. Phoenix PD, married to Carmen in 2001, father figure to Carlos. He looked up at Eddie. What do you want to bet Martinez has his own file? His own reasons for playing Way's game? Eddie's eyes widened as understanding dawned. He's not the only one. 25 years, Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. That's a long time to keep people on leashes. A long time to make promises you never intend to keep. How many others, Way? How many people are you stringing along with hope and threats? The silence from the phone stretched longer this time. When Way finally spoke, his voice had lost its silk coating. You think you understand the game you're playing? I think, Marcus said, walking to the window and looking down at the black sedan, that you got so caught up in orchestrating my destruction that you forgot the most basic rule of revenge, which is? Marcus smiled, remembering something Tommy had told him once, back when they were young and thought they understood the world. The thing about fighting angry, Marcus, is that anger makes you stupid, makes you forget to protect yourself while you're trying to hurt someone else. You should have killed me in Macau, Marcus said, quick, clean, final. Instead, you gave me 25 years to learn who I really am. And you know what I found? Eddie was staring at him now, seeing something in Marcus's face that hadn't been there in years. I'm not the broken killer you needed me to be, Marcus continued. I'm a teacher, a coach, someone who spent decades learning how to build people up instead of tearing them down. And teachers, Way, teachers know how to spot weakness in their students. Your children, Way's voice turned venomous. Miguel, Carla, Danny. My people know where they live, where they sleep. Your people, Marcus said, glancing at Eddie, are tired. They've been playing your game for decades, watching their own lives slip away while they chase promises you'll never fulfill. They're ready for a new story. Eddie straightened slightly, and Marcus saw the moment his old friend made his choice. Not between Way and Marcus, but between the past and the future. Between the man he'd been sent to watch and the man he'd actually found. The kids are safe, Eddie said quietly. I called in favors. Real ones, from real friends. They're protected. Way's scream of rage cut through the phone like a blade. 25 years of perfect control finally shattering. You have no idea what you've done. Marcus picked up the phone, his voice steady as granite. I know exactly what I've done, Way. I've stopped being afraid of ghosts, and for the first time in 25 years, Marcus Rodriguez hung up on his past. The silence that followed was different from any Marcus had experienced in 25 years. Not the hollow quiet of guilt or the brittle stillness of fear, but something approaching peace. He set the phone down gently, as if it were made of glass, and looked at Eddie. You think he'll come for us? Eddie asked. Marcus considered this, watching the black sedan through his window. The car's engine started, and slowly, almost reluctantly, it pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the afternoon traffic. Maybe, Marcus said, but not today. Today, Way's busy discovering that his perfect web has more holes than he thought. Over the next hour, Marcus's phone buzzed with texts from numbers he didn't recognize, screenshots mostly, bank records, flight manifests, police reports, fragments of Way's network exposed by people who'd finally decided they were tired of being puppets. Detective Martinez in Phoenix, a shipping manager in Long Beach, a restaurant owner in San Francisco's Chinatown. One by one, Way's carefully placed assets were stepping into the light. Eddie had made more calls while Marcus watched the exodus. "Elena's alive," he said when he hung up. "Living with her aunt in Guadalajara. Has been the whole time. Way knew where she was 5 years ago." Marcus nodded but said nothing. Some truths took time to settle, like sediment in still water. The gym's front door chimed, and Miguel appeared in the office doorway, sweaty from his evening workout. He took in the scattered papers, Eddie's grim expression, the weight that seemed to hang in the air. "Coach, everything okay?" Marcus looked at this kid, this young man, who'd spent 3 years learning to channel his anger into something productive. Miguel didn't know about Macau or Way or the blood money that had helped build this place. He only knew that someone had believed in him when no one else would. "Yeah," Marcus said, and for the first time in decades he meant it. "Everything's going to be okay." 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the same spot by his office window, but the view had changed. Where the black sedan used to park, Carla's beat-up Honda now sat while she finished her session with the heavy bag. Danny's bike was chained to the fence, and Miguel's distinctive laugh echoed from the main floor. Eddie had left for Mexico the week before. "Going to bring Elena home," he'd said. Really home this time. They'd shaken hands like the friends they'd unexpectedly become, and Marcus had pressed an envelope into Eddie's palm. Not blood money this time. Clean money. Savings he'd built over the years, waiting for a purpose. The phone on Marcus's desk rarely rang anymore. No midnight threats, no mysterious hang-ups. Way's silence was either the calm before a storm or the sound of a ghost finally laid to rest. Marcus suspected the latter. Men like Way built their power on fear and secrecy. Once the shadows were pulled back, once their victims stopped believing in their omnipotence, they were just old men nursing ancient grudges across an ocean of irrelevance. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Carmen stood in the doorway, older but still beautiful, wearing the careful expression of someone walking through a minefield of memory. "Hello, Marcus." They talked for an hour. Not about the past. That territory was too dangerous for casual excavation. Instead, they spoke about Carlos, who was graduating from the police academy next month. About Detective Martinez, who'd taken early retirement and was considering a job teaching criminal justice. About forgiveness, which was easier to discuss in abstract terms than to practice. "I never knew," she said as she prepared to leave. "About why you really left boxing, about any of it. Bob, Detective Martinez, he told me some things recently. About pressure he'd been under, about watching our family." Marcus nodded. "I never wanted you to know, any of you. That was your choice to make," Carmen said softly. "But it was our choice to share the weight. You didn't let us." After she left, Marcus sat alone in his office as evening settled over East LA. The sounds of the neighborhood filtered through his windows, children playing, music from car radios, the eternal percussion of life continuing regardless of individual dramas. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a photo he hadn't looked at in years. Him and Tommy in matching robes before a fight in Vegas, both of them grinning like they owned the world. Tommy's smile no longer looked like an accusation. It looked like forgiveness. Marcus slipped the photo into his jacket pocket and walked out onto the gym floor. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges, new kids who needed someone to believe in them, new chances to build something worthwhile from the wreckage of old mistakes. But tonight, for the first time in 25 years, Marcus Rodriguez was going home without ghosts.